From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello, thank you for being with us on Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our political panel still on a little bit of a summer break, but that doesn't mean we don't bring you great guests talking about things that are happening, in this case, not only Indiana, but the entire Midwest. And we are fortunate enough to be joined today by Mr. Aviv Ezra. He is the Israeli Consulate to the Midwest. Mr. Aviv Ezra, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for being here today.
Pleasure and honor being on your show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So help our audience out here. What exactly does a consulate do?
That's a very good question. So a consulate is a kind of a regional embassy that represent the state of Israel in the entire Midwest. So we cover 9 states, and basically we reach out to many of the decision makers within those 9 states to enhance the relationship. That's our goal. We work on multiple levels. I would say 3 levels could schematically describe it. The government to government, G to G level, the business to business, B to B level, and then the what we call P to P, the people to people. On the government level, we meet with governors, members of Congress, U.S. senators, state legislators, mayors of the major cities. The business to business, as naturally, is combining, connecting, matchmaking the companies and investments. And on the P to P, which is my favorite basket, a lot of interesting opportunities to really do what we call public diplomacy, from pitching a first pitch at different kind of baseball games to being involved in other events that have to do with dealing with other initiatives that we have around the world.
And the reason I ask is a lot of people, when they think like a consulate, they think it's purely a you deal with the American ambassador passports,
right.
Or if a citizen, say an Israeli
Correct.
citizen has an issue, they can go to the consulate and get some kind of help. But I don't think a lot of people fully realize it's a lot more than just that part of what you do.
That is exactly the perception. The majority of the people think that consulate does consular services. So first of all, I have a consulate for consular affairs, but he's the one dealing with it. But it maybe is 10% of what we do. The majority of what we do is actually, as I said, political, business-oriented, and reaching out to friends here in the Midwest.
So let me ask, how did you get in this? I mean, I have friends who, being a military brat, whose parents were in the Foreign Service Corps,
right.
And usually their dad or parent or grandparent was in the Foreign Service, and that's something that was just kind of passed on from generation to generation.
Some of my colleagues, that is the case, and their parents or their sometimes even grandparents were involved in it. In the Israeli foreign ministry is a little bit different. I would say the majority of us are relatively newcomers. I came from the private sector. I was a publisher of 5 local papers, and somewhere around 20 years ago, I said to myself, I want something which is slightly more than just the goal of maximizing profit, but rather to do something for my homeland, which is Israel. I think the Israeli case is not a regular case, in the sense that we have a Jewish state for the Jewish people after 2,000 years. You feel that you are kind of a link in a kind of a chain of so many years. You want to be part of that project called Zionism, which drove me to come into to the Foreign Service. And you're right, by the way, the kids pay a dear price. You extract them from everything, you move them. This is my 4th position abroad, so it's stuff on them.
So what exactly, give us an example of what your day is like. I mean, you get up in the morning, check in, with the folks, back home, file reports. What is the day in the life of a consular general like?
Right. So an average day at Israeli consulate starts with, as you said, arriving to do the consulate. Today, you don't need to go to get the updates from Israel vis-a-vis necessarily just the cable system, but you can get it through WhatsApp, emails, etc. But you do come, you get update to everything that is happening, and then your day, the average day, consists of meetings, briefings, phone calls, as I said, members of Congress, the Jewish communities, other communities. Recently, I pitched the first pitch at a White Sox game. Then you go back and you have an opportunity to be interviewed at esteemed media outlets. And then in the evenings, usually there are either receptions that have to do with economic development or organizations or chambers of commerce or consular corps, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, each day looks totally different, and that is what really is amazing, where the goal is to enhance and cement the relationship between Israel and the Midwest with any specific, by the way, every specific state has a different kind of a focus on. So obviously we're located in Chicago, but, I have the entire system that I described is multiplied when you look at Detroit, when you look at Minneapolis, when you look at Milwaukee, and obviously when you look at Indianapolis and all our good friends in Indiana. So in each kind of a state and a capital, you have a different system. I spoke recently in front of the state legislator in Indianapolis. The speaker here in Indianapolis invited me, Speaker Basma, which I did that also recently. So each day looks different with a major goal in enhancing the relationship and connecting the dots, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndiaPolitics.org. Our guest today is Israeli Consul General for the Midwest, Aviv Ezra. He's in town for a few days, and so we're fortunate enough to have him in studio sort of talking about sort of that Israeli-Indiana relationship. How would you describe, Aviv, that relationship between Israel and Indiana?
Since I have the opportunity to really look at it in a I would say a relative manner, I would say that the relationship with Indiana is unparalleled to many other states here. The Midwest as a whole is one of the, I think, most supportive region for the U.S.-Israel relationship, but Indiana specifically has something which is more than that. A, I think it's the potential that we see in the enhancement of the relationship, and B, it's the people and the leadership of Indiana. Specifically, I want to mention my good friend, Governor Abdul-Hakim, which is, I think, a very unique leader. I think he's very focused on bringing investments to Indiana, bringing business to Indiana, and making sure that Indiana thrives. But he's doing it in such a way, such a manner that the other side, in this case Israel, feels that it's a win-win situation. And I think he's one of the best governors that I had the honor of working with. Other leaders include, for example, the Secretary of Commerce, Jim Challenger, who is, you feel that you have somebody on the other side who is responsive, is involved. He makes it, he's articulate when he talks about Indiana, but again, makes it as a kind of a joint venture of a feeling that both sides can make a really good venture in working together.
Does Israel do a lot of investment here in Indiana?
Well, we have at least a few companies that is already here, and hundreds of millions of dollars in job growth of hundreds of job employment opportunities. I think there is a potential for more, and therefore we have now recently, actually today, the second out of three cybertech Midwest that we're conducting right here, conferences, and we brought here at least 15 Israeli companies. I met with them today. All of them understand that America is not just the coast. America, the heartland of America, is what really counts. And that is in two elements. One, the potential, because this is, in a sense, untapped or uncharted territory for Israeli companies that are not always familiar with the region and the opportunities. And B, as I said, the leadership is very receptive and is willing to do business. So I think I am not only branding Israel in the Midwest, but I'm also branding the Midwest, specifically Indiana, back in Israel. I know also that you have a representative in Israel that we work very closely with. And my goal is also to make sure that Israeli companies come here, invest here, and have business here with Indiana, companies from Indiana.
It's interesting because you made the point about letting Israeli companies in business know, hey, it's not just it's not just New York and L.A. Right. There's a lot of stuff, in the heartland in the middle. Right. Do you find yourself on occasion having to clear up misunderstandings 100%. About Israel and the Middle East from this perspective on this side of the water?
When I arrived here to my position, this is, as I said, my fourth position. One of the first meetings I had was with the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel at the time. And I told him, Mr. Mayor, Israel and Chicago, we have the same problem. So he, first of all, leaned forward towards me and he said, Chicago doesn't have any problems. I said, okay, just give me a second. Let me make my point here. And the point was that the challenge, not the problem, was perception. When you talk about Chicago, I'm mentioning Chicago specifically because the best case scenario is you will say Michael Jordan, and the worst case scenario you still say Al Capone. And Chicago is an amazing, third largest economy in the United States. The same goes with Israel. Best case scenarios when people talk to you about Israel, because of the perception, they say, Bible, maybe camels. Worst case scenario, they talk about the conflict. But when you come to Israel, when the governor came to Israel, when 5 of the governors that I took in the last 2 years in the region, in the Midwest, came to Israel, they were overwhelmed by what they saw. They saw that Israel is not just about the conflict, not necessarily about Iran or Palestinians, but rather about innovation, entrepreneurship, high-tech, IT, telecommunications, beaches, great food, great cuisine, and that's where the perception, to your question, perception is the major challenge that I have to deal with.
While you're here, what is it that you want, folks who watch this program as we wind down our conversation, to know about your country and what you all do?
Well, first of all, I think the first challenge that we have, and I've been feeling it for the last 3 years, is that there was a technical obstacle. The technical obstacle is that because people thought that America is just the coast, we have tens of nonstop flights from Israel to the United States, but they all land either in the East Coast or in the West Coast. We got daily flights to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, daily flights to LA, daily flights to New York, Miami, Boston, Washington, D.C. We had zero to the Midwest. So that is going to change. It's going to change because in about 7 months from now, we're going to have a nonstop direct flight 3 hours from here, from O'Hare to Israel, which will be about 10 and a half or maybe 11 hours straight hours flight. And I think that will change that mechanical, technical obstacle that we had. I think when people arrive to Israel, they will see, if they come from a biblical kind of an angle, a three-dimensional look of the Bible. They could visit Jerusalem, they could visit Nazareth, they could visit Bethlehem, they can visit the Sea of Galilee. They will be overwhelmed by the touristic opportunities. Of course, they're going to see the nature of the Israeli democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They will feel 100% comfortable. And thirdly, I think the business and the economic innovation world ecosystem, Israel today has about 6,000 startup companies. This is number one per capita in the world. This is number 3 in absolute figures after 2 small countries called America and China. This is mind-boggling. This is a country the size of New Jersey with about 8 million people. I think I would like to invite all your viewers and you specifically to come to Israel. And the best thing is I think the product pitches itself, a product called Israel. So I want you to see it by yourself and have the opportunity to really feel it.
Okay, I'm taking up on your offer.
You got it.
I'll give you a call.
You had me at Shalom.
Our guest today has been Israeli Consul General Aviv Ezra on the program today. Mr. Ezra, thank you very much for being with us.
You're very welcome, and I look forward to hosting you in Israel.